On the 25th of October 2017, the title of this episode, The Banks and Wall Street Win. Consumers be damned. This episode is around the defeat in the Senate of rules that the Consumer Protection Agency, crafted by our own Senator Elizabeth Warren of the Commonwealth, to assure that consumers would be able to band together to file class action lawsuits in some instances. We have a package here and we'll go to it, but it was ultimately defeated by the Trump-Pence gang, with Pence himself casting the tie-breaking vote. Now, this assures us that what we are basically up against here, we've had statements from the retiring Senator Jeff Flick of Arizona, who's retiring, and also from Tennessee, the senator there. He is also retiring from the Senate, and had disparaging remarks about one DJ Trump, otherwise known as the President. Now, that in itself is very, very interesting that these senators are making comments. But like the Russian hacking episode, they are distractions. The hacking that was done, in our opinion, had very little to do with the election as such. What did happen there was, Julian Assange is correct, in that someone within the DNC delivered it to WikiLeaks. Now, these are the emails from John Podesta and other actors at the Democratic National Committee. Now we know that the lawyer hired, the law firm, I should say correctly, hired to do an investigation, a dossier. Now, there's nothing incorrect about this, and as far as quote-unquote so-called political ethics, it's not out of bound. All campaigns do what is termed as oppositional research. So they hired a law firm to do it, but later hired as a subcontractor, a former member of the British Intelligence Service, if you ever are a former member of the British Intelligence Service. And he did a very good job. That was on DJ Trump and his various associates revolving around the Russian Federation. And of course, that was also released. But we've had a number of releases. But where the rubber meets the road is on issues like the Consumer Protection Agency and class action versus arbitration. The banks that went to arbitration, and even the little small-time banks, credit unions chimed in. But we'll get to the bottom of what arbitration has actually produced, at least for the banks, and they are putting this as a great victory. It is a great victory for the banks and for quote-unquote Wall Street, particularly credit card companies. Outlaws like the Wells Bank, which point to their arbitration agreements where the consumers could not sue in class actions. Now, the excuse is it makes certain attorneys rich. Well, lawsuits cost a lot of money to begin with. And in these little arbitration things, they hire ex-judges, many times even ex-federal judges, different types of judges, because the arbitration is, at least consumer business arbitration, is weighted against the individual. Now, there was a time when you heard the word arbitration, it was labor versus management, and occasionally labor came out on top, or at least even with management. But this is not the case in banks, credit cards, and various other consumer situations. Let's go to that piece. We worked it from several sources: the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Consumer Protection Agency, and we'll give you the entire gamut here. This is from the New York Times. It is by Jessica Greenberg. She's writing on the 24th of October. We'll just move across this. Republicans voted on Tuesday to strike down a sweeping new rule that would have allowed millions of Americans to band together in class action lawsuits against financial institutions. Overturning the rule was Pence of the Pence Trump gang, a 50-50 tiebreaker, if you can believe that one, which further loosened regulations of Wall Street as the Trump administration and the Republican Party to roll back Obama-era policies enacted in the wake of the 2008 Depression. By defeating the rule, Republicans are dismantling a major effort by the Consumer Protection Agency, the watchdog created by Congress in the aftermath of the mortgage crisis. Now, this is interesting in itself because you had a mortgage crisis here, and it was caused by willy-nilly laissez-faire rules, or the absence of rules of the game. And this will be revisited in the country. The rule, 5 years in the making, would have dealt a severe blow to financial firms, potentially exposing them to a flood of costly lawsuits over questionable business practices. Now that is Cavay in Tor, business of the consumer be damned. For decades, credit card companies and banks have installed arbitration clauses in the fine print. Now that's the thing, in the fine print, not in the large print. Barring people from pooling their resources in class actions. By forcing people into private arbitration, this is even worse than an individual going into court. The clauses effectively took away one of the few tools that the individuals had to fight predatory and deceptive business practices. Arbitration clauses have derailed claims of financial gouging, discrimination in car sales, and unfair fees. The new rules written by the Consumer Protection Agency which was set to take effect in 2019, it's not even in effect, would restore the right of individuals to sue in court. The part of the inspired the action by the Bureau, which has cracked down on debt collectors, student loan industry, and payday loan. In other words, these are the bloodsuckers of the bloodsuckers. That is a part of the problem. The arbitration rule would have sparked a political battle that had taken on broad significance in the new administration. Republicans latched onto the rule as a way to cast the agency as a player in the regulatory regime that was that was impeding business and the economy. Well, it's not impeding the economy or business. What is impeding is depressions. And this is part of the problem that people never learn. This is why it's important, and that was a lesson of 2016, not to focus on DJ Trump. Yes, DJ Trump is a blackguard. He's a bad actor. He is there. And he will remain there unless he resigns or whatever for the next at least 3+ years. Now, as far as his re-election efforts, according to our model, he would be defeated by anyone, including Mom's Maybelline, if she were able to vote. Now, the wrangling, the votes in the Senate was tricky. In the weeks leading up to it, Senator Lindsey Graham, you remember he was in South Carolina, who sponsored legislation to protect military families from being forced into arbitration, said he would not support a repeal of the ruling. And he was joined by Kennedy of Louisiana. So that's why you had the 50 vote margin there. The Democrats argued was precisely what was needed to protect the rights of vulnerable borrowers. Regulators and judges, including some appointed by Republican presidents, has also backed the position. Class actions, they argued, are not just about the size of the payout, which are typically spread amongst a large group of people. They're also about pushing companies to change their practices. Large banks, for example, have had to pay more than $1 billion to settle class action lawsuits beginning in 2009. Tonight's vote is a great setback for every consumer in this country. That is from Richard Corderay. He is the director of the Consumer Bureau. He is from Ohio. Said in a statement, as a result, companies like Wells Fargo, Equifax remain free to break the law without fear of legal blowback from their customers. And this is part of the problem. This is bigger than just the Trump administration. This goes to the heart of basic fairness. Now, Graham and Senator Kennedy of Louisiana broke with the Republicans to vote against it. That's how the 50-50 votes were created. But yet they had to weasel Pence to, as they say, slime in onto the door like a snake from a rock, as LBJ would say, and cast the tying vote. Now, this is what this administration is all about. They have a history of siding with various outlaws and predators and blackguards, period. They are nothing more than hyenas out there to scavenge whatever they can scavenge. Even the Department of the Treasury issued a report accusing the agency of overreaching. That is a favorite term of the Republicans when they are bought and paid for by the financial industry, period. This week, the department weighed in directly on the arbitration rule, warning that the regulation could unleash frivolous lawsuits. Under the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, a frivolous lawsuit cannot proceed. That's the biggest lie ever came down the tap. If the lawsuit is found to be frivolous by the presiding judge, it is tossed. The only way it will come back again is on appeal. And if it's dismissed without prejudice, it can be refiled. But if it's dismissed with prejudice, you have a long road to come down. Now, according to Texas, one of these outlaws from a very red state, a state with people in it that are subject to the payday loans and other outlaws on a daily basis. This is what is happening, period. The friction is intensifying as Mr. Cordray's tenure at the Bureau is ending, appointed by President Obama in 2012 to a 5-year term. He's expected to step down and run for governor in his native Ohio. And this is unfortunate, but one thing to remember, this is just like the health care, the affordable health care, Obamacare. Whatever the Republicans do, they will do. This is the time in which we live. But what progressive people and people of good, quote-unquote, moral values, I should say, should organize for single payer. They will be back. When the Consumer Protection Bureau leaves tomorrow, it will return in years to come. This just simply will not stand. That is why Flick decided to leave. First of all, he was vulnerable in his particular race. What is it? Chemtrail. What's her name? Kerry, I think, or something like that. It was running against him now. Also, McSally, some other people there in Arizona. So those things are heating up. And these races are starting to solidify, as is the race in Alabama. Now, here's where it is. The agency found that once blocked from suing, few people went to arbitration at all. And the results of those who did were dismissed. During a 2-year period, studied, only 78 arbitration claims resulted in judgments in favor of consumers who got $400,000 in total relief. Now, that was more than 75 of them, period. So this sort of tells you what's going on there. The arbitration clause appears in tens of millions of contracts. Consumer Protection Agency was specifically mandated to study arbitration under Dodd-Frank. That was in 2010. The effort culminated in a 728-page report that was released in March of 2015. So that shows what was going on here and how they were able to pull the fast one on the American people, period. Now, this is another situation here from Bloomberg. Trump administration chooses big meat over little farmers. Rural Americans voted for him. They did indeed. But he didn't return the favor when it came to the Obama rule meant to level the playing field. After years of fighting for an Obama-era rule that would help farmers sue Mammoth, and again, this is the same situation. Mammoth, the little person versus the big person. Companies they work for, advocating groups for American small pork, beef, and poultry people. May have been dealt a final blow by the Department of Agriculture. The fight was about whether small farmers can sue if they feel they have been mistreated by big companies. Poultry farmers, for example, often get their chicks and feed them for meat producers, which in turn the farmers pay the farmers for the full grown product. If the farmer wants to sue the company for retaliates against him because he complains about his contract, say by sending him sick chicks, badly fed chicks, the farmer needs to show the company's action hurt not only him but the entire industry. See, these are rules here what President Obama was changing. I can't tell you how disappointed I am, said Mike Weaver, a West Virginia poultry farmer and president of the Organization for Competitive Markets, who voted for Donald Trump. Rural America came out and supported the president, and if he were for us, he wouldn't have been where he is now. What they did was wrong, and it shouldn't have happened that way. Well, unfortunately, they didn't understand. This gives the meatpacking industry the ability to do whatever they wish in terms of retaliation against an individual. Again, it's the same old situation there. Farm groups, including the National Farmers Union, the Rural Advancement Foundation, the National Farm Aid, and the American Cattlemen's Association, the Organization for Competitive Markets, supported the Obama-era rule. Now, if you can get the Cattlemen's Association to support anything progressive, the Farm Bureau, etc. Now, Farm Aid, yes. So this is basically what happened here. Let's see. The Trump administration allowed to take effect, citing the support from small business and rural American lobbyists, such as the National Cattle Beef Association, the National Pork Producers Association, the National Meat Institute. Those are institutions put up by these mammoth operations. They really do not have any popular base at all, period. When Trump was coming in with the mantra of reducing regulations, as Jeremy Scott, a protein researcher at Zaho Securities, there was relief. In the end, it was industry, not farmers. But guessed correctly, National Chick Council President Brown publicly praised the USDA rotten decision. My term, not his. If there's some ambiguity, the agency responsible for carrying out the rule is given the deference, said Carrie Corgisi, a law professor at the University of Pennsylvania and director of the Penn Program on Regulations. It may have been reasonable to interpret the statute the way the Obama administration did, but that doesn't mean the Trump administration isn't reasonable. Well, you can see why he has his job. For now, farm groups are looking at other avenues. Weaver sent out a letter asking Trump to issue an executive order reversing the USDA situation. Something that more than likely will not happen. And this is from Richard Cadre here. The truth about arbitration rule: it protects the American consumer. This is in the Hill. This summer, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau issued a rule that prevents financial companies from using arbitration clause to deny groups of consumers the ability to pursue their legal rights in court. We put this rule in place with after conducting the we talked about that 700-page comprehensive study that found these claims were effectively blocking billions of dollars relief from millions of harmed consumers. Opponents of our rule are now doing everything they can to prevent these protections from taking place in 2019, that is. And they have done it. So we'll finish up his situation here. We put it up on the Facebook. Big companies do it as well. Ironically, the Chamber of Commerce, a staunch opponent of the arbitration rule, is now sued to block it. It's banding together on behalf of many companies to keep the consumer from banding together to assess their own rights in court. The fight thus now will be decided in the courts and need not be decided in the Senate. Well, whatever is decided, however, the acting controller errant claim has no legitimate part to play in the ultimate determination. So this is what happens many times. A little side issue here. Twitter is deciding to do a little bit of openness here. They are going to open up their advertisements and tell the public, including political ads, in the latest request by a technology company, by a technology company to criticism about its role in spreading foreign propaganda. Again, it's back to that. The company said that on its new rules, users would be able to see who has created an ad, how long the ad has been running, and how the ad was targeted towards a specific user. Political ads for a candidate or party would carry a label to make them stand out. Twitter said it would disclose who has paid for the election advertising, allowing consumers to find information about the buyer. So this in itself is a step forward, no doubt about that. On to sport. Let me see here. As part of our package deal here. Let me just check on our time here. We're going merrily along. We're fine on time. Nonetheless, in Los Angeles last night, the Dodgers won the Game 1 of the World Series. Let me just run the line down here. The Astros had one run and 3 hits, no errors. And the Dodgers had 3 runs and 6 hits. The winner was Mr. Kershaw. The loser was Dallas Kershaw. And Kenley Jansen got the save. And we have some backgrounder from ESPN. How Justin Turner, he's the man with red hair, red beard, and Chris Taylor became the soul of LA's post-game surge. Nonetheless, in 2013, Justin Turner was a New York Met, cast off. In 2016, Chris Taylor was unwanted by the Seattle Mariners. Now they're the heart and soul of the LA Dodgers in post-season. On Tuesday night, Taylor hit the first offering from Mr. Dallas Kershaw in the bottom of the first. That had the Dodgers up 1-0. Period. And, of course, Taylor changed his bat to going from a heavier, 34.5 ounces to 33.5 ounces. And as they say, the rest is history there. And I thought it was a ball from my perspective, said the on-deck hitter, Corey Bellinger. who said there was a little noise coming from the dugout after the pitch, and in the heat of the moment, you get excited, but you can't let it get to you. Anyway, Turner swung and missed at another inside pitch. The 1-1 pitch was a fastball. It was low and away and off the corner. The pitch, Dallas Kershaw makes a living on against the right-hand batters. He wants you to chase, to pound it into the ground. Turner said, so good at staying disciplined in the strike zone. Took the pitch, except the plate umpire, because they call it a strike. He was the umpire at the plate. He didn't exactly there. Anyway, sort of the career there, he hit the 3-run homer, which is very important. Kershaw aces Astros, rewrites October reputation in the game. This is also from ESPN, I believe. Yeah, it is. And here, Buford Doolittle is the person here. You get a little bit of this. In the first World Series game played at Dodger Stadium since 1988. If you tune into our World Series program, we talk about it being the first one played there since 1988 was a memorable one, particularly Kurt Gibson, who unfortunately now suffers from Parkinson's disease. There were 54,253 fans, assorted players, media, luminaries on hand there. And the temp was, 103. Hotter than it's ever been at the start of a Major League Baseball postseason game, no doubt about that. The score ending up 3-1 in Game 1. Kershaw overpowered baseball's best lineup, striking out 11 over 7 innings, held the Astros, who led the majors in runs, scoring during the regular season to 3 hits. The Astros are a good hitting team, Kershaw said. They hit a lot of homers and don't strike out. That is true. In many performances, running contrary to old tales of postseason woes, Kershaw finished 1 strikeout shy of the playoff best. He notched his 5th double-digit strikeout performance in the postseason and again against Houston's lineup. A lot of lineup there to reach 10 Ks, that's 10 strikeouts. In doing so, Kershaw might have dealt one of the final blows to his largely exaggerated postseason record. One buried by a handful of shaky innings, often when he works on short rest, and he has done that. He has come back on very, very short rest. Tonight was one of those nights, I think the first time in a while, where we seen all 3 pitches sync up. And in fact, Kershaw, of course, had been hurt part of the season and came back. So the Dodger greats from the past are around on a daily basis. Don Newcomb often can be found in the dugout, where he is regularly chatting up closer Kenley Jansen. Sandy Koufax is a steady presence and has an admirer in Kershaw. Fernando Valenzuela, we remember him, can be found hanging out in the press box as part of the Spanish language team broadcasting there. Tommy Lasorda watches from the 4th row. You could go on and remember the people that were there. But anyway, it is the Fall Classic. Game 1 had gone very differently. The overblown narrative about the October version of Kershaw might had entered Mark Twain territory, but it didn't. Kershaw didn't walk a batter. He struck out. His 11 strikeouts tied to Don Newcomb, who was at the park for Game 1, the most Ks there. And it was a Koufax-like performance. Well, he's not a Koufax, but anyway, I guess he'll do. Kershaw needs to be Koufax good. That's from because Dallas Kershaw nearly matched him pitch for pitch. There's no doubt about that. Kershaw was really good tonight. That's from A.J. Hinch. He used to be a catcher himself. And, of course, Mr. Chris Taylor, utility player before this season, was named Covey MVP of the National Season Championship win over the Cubs. So, in other words, some new people have shown up here. Mr. Taylor is one of those people that has blossomed out there. And perhaps of all, Kershaw pitched a scoreless 7. He ended the game with a 25-point, this is a hellacious one, 5.0 ERA in 6 playoff games. Well, not tonight. Doing so, he put the up one best there. A measurement of pitchers' overall effectiveness was 78, and according to BaseballReference.com, we go there all the time, it ranks 12th among the 106th World Series starts in franchise history, and we go back to Mr. Newcomb, Mr. Koufax, Don Drysdale, and Oral Hershiser, the pitcher we mentioned last night in 1978. Don Drysdale passed. He used to be a broadcaster on Monday Night Baseball. Anyway, this finishes up this article, and we go on to the L.A. Times. Clayton Kershaw dominance leads Dodgers 3-1 victories. The headlines over the Astros, and this is by Andy McCullough. Anyway, we'll start with the sun. Started to set in Dodger Stadium as the trio left the bullpen, yet 103 degrees still cling to Chavez Ravine. 103 degrees, you can imagine that. The praise for Kershaw overflowed from the Dodger clubhouse. A special night as manager Dave Roberts. We won't repeat this. We were just looking at different cities here. Only 3 Dodgers have ever before faced Kershaw. The 2015 American League Cy Young winner. One of those was Taylor. Kershaw retired him 3 times in 2014, 2 years before the Dodgers acquired Taylor from Seattle, 3 years before Taylor revamped his swing and emerged as a budding star. The first pitch thrown on Tuesday was an 88-mile-an-hour fastball down the middle. Taylor smashed it deep into left field pavilion, 447 feet. So that sign tells you sometimes what people can do. Kershaw had 73 pitches through 6 innings. He drowned out in the second at-bat in the bottom then and there. And let's see. 9 days earlier, Taylor had stamped himself in the franchise lore with a walk-off home run. That was that with the poor Cubbies. And let's see. There's little needed work. Kershaw fired a 94-an-hour fastball up and away to catcher Brian McCann. McCann, a solid player, is not expected to pitch again until Game 5 in the series. There. The Dodgers have ignored the temptation to use him on short rest in their playoffs. Well, that's good. And he has occasionally come in from the bullpen. It kind of reminds one of Mr. Oral Hershiser. Hershiser's been in the bullpen also. Anyway, thinking back on it, and to the Astros, well, not much can be said there. Just a headline here, Houston Chronicle. Astros shut down by Clayton Kershaw in Game 1 loss. What more can they say? The Major League's best offense, on which the Astros' 101 winning season was built, thrived, not only because of his power, but because of his ability to make contact. But none of that seemed to matter with Clayton Kershaw on the mound Tuesday night for the Game 1 of the World Series, the first at Dodger Stadium since 1988. The left-hander is the greatest pitcher of his generation. The and the greatest starter yet in his Hall of Fame Webby career. He made the Astros victims, no doubt about that. They're 3-1 a loss. Kershaw, the former MVP and three-time Cy Young Award winner, became the first pitcher to strike out 11 in the World Series since Mr. Randy Johnson in 2001. On Tuesday night, Don Newcomb had been the only pitcher to record 11 strikeouts without issuing a walk in a World Series game. He accomplished that feat with the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1949. Dave Roberts, manager Dave Roberts, rode him for only seven innings. This is Kershaw, and 83 pitches before turning the game to reliever Brandon Morrow, and then Kenley Jansen. Brandon Morrow is acted as the setup man there. The Astros, with Mr. Churchill, he went 6 2/3 ending there. I don't think it had anything to do with the American League Championship Series. That's a completely different pitching staff. That's from A.J. Hinch. He is the Houston manager. Kershaw is a 10-year veteran who's still only 29 years old. Became the first pitcher all season to strike out 11 Astros. Only two. Mr. Corey Kubler and Aaron Nolan of Kubler is of Cleveland and Nolan is of the Phillies. The Astros, who fell 0-5 all times in World Series games, have to. They're going to deal with Mr. Rich Hill on Wednesday. They muster a split in the series. They need to have a split. From our perspective, going back to Houston down 2-0 would not be a good deal at all. Alex Bergman had the sole home run. Singles by Josh Reddick and Tube. George Springer went 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts. Carlos Correa, Brian McCabe, and Marvin Gomez each for 0 for 3. 2 of Kershaw's strikeouts came against Kershaw, which is not much to say there. And let me finish this up. I'll try to finish it up here. He's a great pitcher. He's going to be in the Hall of Fame, Bergman said. Well, Bergman, no doubt about that. Man pitching 93 miles an hour there. 23, Bergman became the youngest American League player to homer in the World Series since 23-year-old Manny Melendez took Mark Wallace. Remember Mr. Mark Wallace? Deep in Game 4 of the 1995 series between Cleveland and Atlanta. Let me think here. Think about where was my anyway. I think Mark Wallace was with Atlanta. Anyway, it doesn't really matter very much there. But that is 22 years ago. Very long time ago. Nonetheless, this will end our episode here. The banks and Wall Street win. Consumers be damned on the 25th of October, 2017. We are still working on a BR on the World, a report on Cartagena and its succession movement against the Spanish government in Madrid. And we'll get that out. We also have an open source report coming up here that we've been working on here for the last 2 weeks. We'll get that up and you'll get it on iHeart Radio. And let's see what else is going on here. President Xi is obviously on to his second term there. And later on Thursday, we'll get some information, classified files that will be released on the Kennedy assassination. And Robert Guillaume, the actor that played Benson, is dead at 89. Prostate cancer is cited there, a man 89 years old, very unusual. But nonetheless, Robert Guillaume may rest in peace. He was a very versatile actor, no doubt about that. And just looking at the BBC, it didn't seem to call on today, but anyway, it will be there. We kind of look to the international thing, part of the coverage that we try to inspire here to look more at world events, as we're not totally here. From Kapolsky, it obtained suspected NSA hacking code. We'll have that on from a U.S. computer. We'll have that on later too. This is from Reuters. Under Trump's plan, refugees from 11 countries face additional U.S. barriers. No doubt about it. Harder to get into the country, period. Visa's quarterly profits up 11%. And Afanon, the insurer, beat expectations there. Coca-Cola's profits, Mr. Buffett is very happy about this, are up 38%, if you can imagine that one. So businesses are doing very well, period, out there. Apple reduced facial ID accuracy to ease production. Not sure what that is all about. And Mr. Berdahl, Bo Berdahl, let's see. Judge is weighing his punishment after, again, comments by a DJ Trump. So there we go. Not unusual here. Just looking at one of the Chinese people there using magnifying. Anyway, a magnifying glass doesn't really matter there whether you use a magnifying glass or not. T-Mobile and Sprint ready board committees. They are working on a merger. Not enough, as they say, business in the mobile market for the two companies, so they have to, as they say, combine together. So this is basically the toss from the world news here, what we have, and that will do it for us.